Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Los Angeles Conservancy's Preservation Perspective series. I'm Adrian Scott Fine, the Senior Director of Advocacy for the Los Angeles Conservancy, and I will be moderating today's program. This is the third in the series and features Council District 15 runoff candidates Danielle Sandoval and Tim McOsker. We bring this program to you to inform and highlight preservation aspects and hear what candidates have to say and their viewpoints on preservation. And so you are aware the Conservancy as a nonprofit organization cannot and will not endorse any candidates as part of this series. Briefly about the Conservancy. For those that may not already be familiar, our work at the Conservancy is fundamentally about people and places, and the idea that places help tell the stories in hundreds of diverse communities all over Los Angeles. We do this work through both education and advocacy and approach it through a lens of managing change as LA is continually growing and developing. And for our members joining us today, thank you. Thank you for all you do to support us, and for everyone else, thank you also. Please consider joining us as a partner and support us in this meaningful work. So for Council District 15, today we're focused on this district and its many historic places and communities contained within. From communities of Watts to San Pedro, CD 15 is rich in historic places and neighborhoods, and like all of Los Angeles, they face unique challenges through the planning and development processes. We have numerous Conservancy members active throughout CD 15 and many more doing great work through various community organizations. So thank you for all that you do. So let's get started. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And at this point, I would like to welcome Danielle and Tim, if you can go ahead and turn your cameras on. Welcome. Thank you so much for being part of this program today. So today's program is not a debate, but a forum with a series of questions developed by us and in part by you. And thank you to all those that submitted great suggestions through the registration process. And through both long form and what we're calling rapid fire questions, each candidate will be given brief but equal time to respond. To the candidates, we strongly recommend and encourage you to watch the timer on the screen, as otherwise we will have to cut you off, and neither of us will like that. So I think you'll see the time will go by quickly, but keep an eye on that. There will be opening and closing remarks by both candidates. There are no rebuttals, so we ask each candidate to stay focused on the question and your views on preservation, and to always be respectful of one another and mute yourself while any of the other candidates is speaking. And to each candidate, thank you again for taking part today, and we look forward to learning more about why preservation matters to you and the important work you tend to do within Council District 15. A few minutes ago, we did a coin toss. I think some people may have seen that, and Tim will start with initial introductions, opening remarks, followed by Danielle. You'll each have 90 seconds to provide a short introduction, so feel free to begin. Again, keep an eye on the timer, but we'll start with you, Tim, first, so go ahead.
Thank you very much, Adrian. It's good to see you again. Thank you to Linda and the Conservancy for all the important work that you do. I'm really pleased to be here with you and your audience live and also recorded. Tim McOsker, born and raised here in the Harbor area, and my family has been here for generations. And so our intersection between the historic aspects of this district and my family and my call to service are many. My grandfather came to this area to be on the team that opened Terminal Island Prison. And I remember as a child that he took the ferry every day over to work. And that ferry building is one iconic structure in our district. My father, as a firefighter, worked at Fire Station 65s in Watts on several shifts. And that's also an important iconic structure. So here, as I'm running for city council, and we're talking about addressing the issue of homelessness and the cost of housing and economic development and advancing, looking towards the future to make sure that we have a sustainable place for our families to live, it's also important for us to honor our past. And so I appreciate the role that Conservancy has in making sure that we are preserving and honoring our past and meshing that with our opportunity to preserve and create housing that's affordable, and also to create vibrant centers so that we have good economic development in various nodes that rely upon places that are historic and significant to us. So I appreciate being with you on this mission.
Thank you. Danielle.
Hello, thank you for giving me the opportunity to introduce myself. My name is Danielle Sandoval, and I'm a candidate running for Los Angeles City Council in the 15th District. I'm a third generation Angelina and very proud to have grown up in Northeast Los Angeles, where there's a lot of robust history. And growing up, I went to the iconic Abraham Lincoln High School, which is has beautiful infrastructure. I also, in my early years in high school, I did historical reports on the Arroyo Seco, downtown LA, North Broadway, where my grandmother used to go and see the historic big bands on Broadway. So I have a lot of roots of Los Angeles and a lot of beautiful memories. I've been active in local politics for about a decade, and I've been an active participant in ensuring that skate parks are erected, mural projects are pushed through, and as a budget advocate overseeing the funding and the need to allocate these funds in different areas of the district. Throughout my campaign, I have been in and out of our district from San Pedro to Watts, and I witnessed firsthand the need for not only basic services, but also preservation of our historical infrastructure, as in Watts, the Mufandi, the historic Watts towers, our waterfront. In Wilmington, there's so much beautiful historical infrastructure that I want to preserve.
Thank you. Thank you both. So at this point, we're going to transition to what we're calling our 6 long form questions. So Tim will start and for the first 3 questions, and then we'll switch. And Danielle, you'll start with the next 3. So you'll have a point where you're back to back in terms of that. So for the first question, it's focused on growth. Historic landmarks from iconic buildings to humble legacy businesses help to define and connect a community. Over the last decade, development across Los Angeles has made its way to Council District 15 and is now rapidly transforming the district's historically quiet communities. As council member, how will you balance the need for new growth with the preservation of the district's beloved places and unique characteristics? So starting with Tim. And you will have 90 seconds for these each.
Thank you. Yes, the 15th district is on the cusp across the district on having rapid development. We have opportunities from Watts to San Pedro. And what's very important for us to do is make sure that we are engaging the community at the basic community, neighborhood level, to make sure that we are talking to our neighborhood councils, our land use planning groups, to introduce the opportunities as they arise, and then working with our local communities to make sure, whether we're in Watts or the Gateway or Harbor City or Wilmington or San Pedro, to make sure that folks are aware of what the opportunity is, what's being presented to us, and what are those important assets in our community, particularly our cultural assets that we want to make sure that we preserve as part of the development, or to make sure, if we're doing infill development, that we have compatible projects that will only enhance those things that are iconic, from the towers to the Mufandi to our Warner Grand Theater, all the way down south in the part of the district. So I think what's going to be important for us to do is to take very seriously the neighborhood council role, and to take very seriously the environmental reviews, including, as we know, environmental documents also review the historic fabric of the surrounding areas, and make sure that we're meshing those together to protect both the opportunity and the historic structures.
Great, thank you. Same question, Danielle.
Thank you. I have been throughout the district, and the one thing that I hear from constituents in San Pedro, Watts, Wilmington, all throughout the district is the overdevelopment, and especially in Wilmington, the gentrification, and that's really what it is. The overdevelopment is tearing down our historical infrastructure, and especially in San Pedro, people are just up in arms that they're not involved in the process and nothing is being preserved. I will, and I have promised to protect that infrastructure, and also that there is a balance between high overdeveloped buildings along near single family dwellings, which people are terrified of having a huge building towering. They're beautiful home. There's homes here in our district that are historical sites. And they need to be preserved, they need to be protective, but also the integrity of our landscaping needs to also be protective. Our streets, there's still cobblestone in Wilmington. There's still cobblestone roads up in the hills in San Pedro. And I want to, and the community does too, want to look at it and restore it. Also, the engagement of the community and making sure that they are involved and they are aware, and we are doing the proper outreach and bringing all the communities together to the table so they are aware of these projects.
Great, thank you. The next question is focused on Watts and African American heritage. Only 10% of Los Angeles's historic cultural monuments, or HCMs, are designated in connection to women or Black, Indigenous, people of color, or BIPOC communities, and only 3% are connected to African American heritage. Organizations like Friends at Mafundi, who successfully designated the Watts Happening Cultural Center, are working to bring awareness and protection to historically significant Black sites in Watts. What do you see as the biggest barriers to equity in the Historic Cultural Monuments program, and how would you increase representation of marginalized histories in Council District 15? Tim?
Thank you very much. I have had the pleasure of being at Mafundi with Rita Coalfield and the Friends of Mafundi and enjoying that property very much. And I think what is important for the council office to recognize is that it has to be part of each community, and we need to be in the community, for example, reopening and staffing the historic Watts City Hall building, and to make sure that we are, in community, talking to the Watts Neighborhood Council, talking to the Watts Gang Task Force, talking to all of the leadership in a place like Watts, to make sure that we are adequately protecting the train station, the Mafundi building, the towers, the cultural crescent. I mean, I would partner with all of our great local nonprofits, including WLCAC, to make sure that we are talking about the history, that we are preserving the history, that we are recognizing the history and celebrating it. I've had the opportunity to be at Freedom Plaza, where we heard from some of the Watts prophets, and I've been at Mafundi, where we heard the history of the Watts prophets and the important legacy of poetry and art and music that was part of the civil rights movement and came out of Watts. And so what is important for us, and what is the big impediment, is that there are neighborhoods that are overlooked because, based on historic racism, based on structural racism, folks thought that they would get away with not listening to the neighborhood. We will be in the neighborhood, and we will make sure that we are honoring the legacy.
Thank you. Danielle?
When you look at the history of the Mafundi building, it's so inspirational because our youth built that. And it's a true example of community that came together to develop something for art, music, culture, and we need to preserve that. It's not just the infrastructure that was built, it's the services that are being provided out of it that are directly benefits the community that surrounds it. These are infrastructure buildings that we need to preserve within every community throughout Los Angeles. But this building particularly, recently, organization that was in that building who is serving the community, our youth, for entrepreneurship and financial literacy. These are the individuals that need to oversee the building to ensure that we continue to provide these services to the community. They're vital. And for the tenants to have been displaced, also displaces a service that is being provided to our youth. This building is the infrastructure that not only provides beautiful historical history, but also vital services that the community is in need in. And we need to not only preserve it, but also preserve the basic services. I have been at the railroad many of times, actually back in 2017, and wanting to work with the community to preserve the railroad station, which brought in hundreds and hundreds of jobs into the Watts community. And that also needs to be preserved as well. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, the next question is focused on demolition, but also unpermitted work policies at the City of Los Angeles. This year, community members nominated San Pedro's beloved Walker's Cafe as a historic cultural monument. Despite this, some unpermitted alterations have occurred. LA's current policies do not adequately protect historic places from unpermitted work, alterations, and sometimes even demolition. These policies also do not address the issue of demolition by neglect. What policies would you propose to strengthen demolition deterrence and incentivize rehabilitation and reuse of historic buildings in the district? And start again with Tim and followed by Danielle.
Thank you very much. Yes, the Walker's Cafe is a terrific story. Emma Ralt in our community really advocated hard for the Walker's Cafe and circulated petitions and worked with the local neighborhood councils and made presentations to many of our boards. And there was a lot of support around recognizing and nominating Walker's, and we are glad that it will be preserved. One of the concerns, though, immediately after that, after all of that effort, there was work going on. There was work going on that appeared to be unpermitted and appeared to be on weekends and evening hours. And I spoke to Emma and others personally. And what we needed to do is make sure that we have on unpermitted work and on demolition work, we need to make the fines and the penalties for that type of work stricter. Because if a developer, if a property owner believes that a demolition will result in the end at some nominal fine, they will do a cost benefit analysis from their own perspective, and it will result in unpermitted work and demolition. And that is patently unfair and wrong. So we need to increase those fines. We also need to make sure that we are staffing up properly in building and safety to be able to address these issues at off hours and respond to constituents when they are concerned. I would say on the proactive side, we need to double down on making sure that we're availing ourselves of Mills Act and other incentives to put people in a position where, whether it's a federal or state or local incentive or a Mills Act agreement, to make sure that they're incented to put money into a building and preserve it.
Thank you. Danielle?
Thank you for bringing up Walker's Cafe, but there's also another building. I'm not sure if you're aware, it's the Moeller House Museum. And there is also a building going on right behind it. And that building is actually where they want to rebuild on. I spoke to some of the South Bay Historical Society members, and there is discussions that the building may be moved for development, for new development to go in, and moving infrastructure such as, these infrastructures that are very, movement can actually deteriorate the infrastructure. And we need to make sure that when we get into these RFPs or these bids for new development, that we are also protecting the surrounding environment, land infrastructure that's around it, in regards to when they're building these new buildings. Also, as was mentioned, is adding more money into the building and safety. As a neighborhood council budget advocate, we've looked at their budgets, and they have just a few staffers that can go out and do the inspections. But not only do we need to make sure that they are well equipped with staff, but also in San Pedro, in our San Pedro office, so we can go and do routine checks as they're building along.
Great, thank you. Okay, we're now going to switch the order. So Danielle, you'll be first, followed by Tim. This question is focused on the port. The former Star-Kissed Cannery on Terminal Island is one of the last examples of Los Angeles's historic, prolific canning industry. It tells the history of the Japanese Americans who helped launch the canning industry and the Mexican American and other immigrant laborers who sustained it. In 2013, the Port of Los Angeles's Board of Harbor Commissioners approved a new master plan update. Preservation was identified as a goal, yet one by one, historic buildings there are being reclassified as no longer being historic and then demolished through a pattern of neglect and claims of economic hardship. Now Star-Kissed Cannery is slated for demolition, and a decision is expected next month. Where do you stand on the proposed demolition, and do you believe there is a role for preservation and reuse of industrial sites in shaping the port's future? So Danielle, you'll be first, followed by Tim.
Absolutely. And not only that, we also have Warehouse 1 that should also be designated, and all of the sculptures that were in the port in Portugal. All of that should be given back to the community and preserved, as well as create a museum within the Maritime Museum to make sure that those articles are well documented for the public. But I am in full support of protecting and preserving the Star-Kiss plant, and make sure that we also preserve the other infrastructure that's in the port as well.
Great, thank you. Tim.
Thank you very much. I am in support of preserving the Star-Kissed cannery, the large tilt-up building. It's one of its last examples, maybe next to Southwest Marine, but it's in better shape than Southwest Marine. I am disappointed and will hold the port accountable on designating areas where they're going to do preservation and then not following through on their promise. With that designated demolition, fortunately, folks did intervene. Community members like my friend Anthony Mizatich and others showed up and asked for a stop to the wrecking ball. There was an RFI that went out, and I am eager to see whether or not we are going to be able to connect that property to some beneficial use. I would be for that activity. I will say happily that Warehouse 1 is federally designated, so Warehouse 1 will be preserved. I also think that there are other assets in the harbor that need to be preserved. I'm proud to say that warehouses at Altasea at the Port of Los Angeles will be preserved as part of that designation. While I was a CEO at Altasea, we completed a very expensive and worthwhile EIR, including an historic review, and the warehouses 57, 58, no, 58, 59, and 60 are historically significant, and it will be brought up to its glory. I am for making sure that our public buildings in and around the port are preserved as is appropriate.
Thank you. Okay, our next question is focused on housing. Housing is one of the most pressing and often divisive issues facing Los Angeles. In 2020, the Conservancy's report, Preservation Positive, gathered data that demonstrates the majority of LA's older and historic housing is also the largest concentration of existing affordable, rent-stabilized RSO and naturally occurring affordable housing, or NOAA. New housing production will not solely address the fundamental challenges we're facing, especially if we also simultaneously keep demolishing older affordable housing for new development. How do you intend to protect buildings that provide critical affordable housing while also creating new housing opportunities without leading to displacement of existing residents throughout Council District 15? Danielle?
Thank you. I just want to add one thing. When we're talking about the port in regards to some of the infrastructure that's in there, some of the soil that's in the port is also toxic. So we have to also look at some environmental reviews as well. And I know that Altasea also sits on in toxic soil. So we need to, when we're reviewing the preservation, we have to also look at the environmental impact that it also has while we're preserving it. In protecting the infrastructure as far as affordable housing, when we are building affordable housing, we need to create a moratorium right now to ensure that the rents are not going sky high with new development, because when new development happens, it draws up the real estate, the price of real estate. So I want to create a moratorium on affordable housing. And then when we're moving into the new housing, that it stays affordable, so we are not displacing individuals as well.
Great, thank you. Tim?
Thank you very much. I appreciate the Conservancy's report that identifies that so much of our affordable housing stock is in fact historically significant property, whether it comes into the HPOZs, which is historic preservation overlay zones, or individual properties. And I think it is really important for us to make sure that we remain committed to preserving that historic stock, because it tends to be places that have not only affordability, but great diversity and a sense of place. I think it's important for us to continue to protect our rent stabilized or RSO units. and to make sure as we're bringing in new development that we're not displacing RSO or displacing affordability and returning it with a more expensive stock that tends to gentrify neighborhoods. So I will be committed to making sure that we are strict on enforcing the protections on the RSO, on strict on the city surrounding protections on Ellis Act enactments. And I also think because we are in a coastal area, the Mellow Act enforcement would be very important to make sure that we're preserving affordable stock that's in and around the coastline. So as we are moving forward with development, we need to make sure that we are incorporating affordability into each project, that we are not displacing affordability for something that is market rate and have at least 1-to-1 and probably better, and to protect the stock that we have both in HPOZs and in the coastal zones.
Thank you. Great.
Thank you.
Okay, the last of our long form questions is focused on leadership. Preservation efforts often involve many community stakeholders and can take years of negotiation and work to arrive at successful win-win outcomes. What is your track record of collaborating with stakeholders, bringing disparate groups together, and making sure community groups are listened to and valued? How will you ensure historic preservation priorities are included in these types of convenings and community discussions? Danielle?
Thank you. With my work that I have been doing on the neighborhood councils and with other community organizations, I have been working with nonprofit organizations, community leaders, neighborhood councils, budget advocates, advisory boards. As a matter of fact, I sit on Jeffrey Prang's advisory board, the county assessors, and having my real estate certification, I am very versatile on what that looks like and what needs to be done as on both ends. I have proven leadership of bringing all communities together, having town hall meetings, working with land use committee chairs, looking at ordinances, things that are on council files, where they're going, when to alert the community, make them aware. And I will bring all that experience into this office. I have been doing it for almost a decade, and we'll continue to do that. It's our staff. Our staff needs to be in the community. My staff will be in the community and ensuring that all organizations are brought to the table. They have a voice, and we all have the same goal. And I've said this very often, we have the same goal, we just have different ways of getting there. And having a true leader in that position to be able to bring all parties together for the end result of the common goal is my superpower. I've been doing it for almost a decade.
Okay, thank you. Tim?
Thank you very much. I appreciate the question. I feel that working with various groups from all ends of the spectrum on any issue is my greatest strength. I think that my support from business groups, from labor, from environmental groups, to local community groups is evidence of the fact that I am known over the course of my 30 years of doing this as someone that can bring common sense solutions to complex problems. And we do know that as we move forward with new development, as we face the issue of making sure that we're bringing in affordable housing and attacking the crisis of homelessness, that we will have intersections where historic fabric might be impacted, and we will have folks on all ends of the question, and we will have folks that are advocating sincerely and genuinely and with good faith from their perspective, and they will have different outcomes that they wish to see happen. And I think it's important for me to be sort of at the center of that potential conflict and make sure that we are working with the community to identify what is the goal we are trying to achieve. How can we make sure that we preserve as much of historic fabric again, get to the issue in my analogy of making sure that we build housing, and to get to a compromise where we can compromise everything except our values. And I think that's what I have been known for over the course of my career. Thank you.
Great, thank you. We made it through the long form questions, so now we're going to transition to what we're calling our rapid fire. It's not that rapid, but it's shorter questions, shorter amount of time. So you'll each have 45 seconds to respond. And again, the first two questions, Tim, you'll start. Then we'll switch the next two questions. Danielle will start, and then we'll do a coin toss for the very last question before we do closing remarks. So let's start with the first question. which is on cultural significance. The Conservancy often works with communities who want to protect places with cultural but not architectural value. Do you think sites of historic and cultural significance warrant the same level of protection as architecturally significant buildings and places? If so, how would you support community members in protecting those places? Start with Tim.
This one, I would say unequivocally, yes. I mean, we are in a district where there are a number of culturally significant assets and events that have occurred at places. I mean, Walker's Cafe may be one. There's nothing architecturally significant that I know of about the building, but it has a great cultural significance for how it interfaced with the community and how it was used in film and television. And so what I think would be important to do is make sure as we are out and about in the community that we are using Survey LA, for example, which is a great start. And thank you for that work, making sure we're evaluating Survey LA, evaluating our neighbors, talking to our constituents. And as opportunities arise for these culturally significant locations, make sure that we are advising folks through the process, getting it in front of the commission, and then making a decision.
Thank you. Danielle?
Absolutely. I said in the very beginning, I grew up in Los Angeles, and there's so many historical landmarks just in the area that I grew up in, and walking through downtown LA and making my way all the way down, to the southernmost part of the city. And there's a lot of buildings and places where historical events occurred that most are not aware of unless you actually grew up here in Los Angeles. And preserving these historical landmarks, and as well as the infrastructure, and working with the community and nonprofit organizations. There's a lot of nonprofit organizations, community members that people are unaware of, that don't have, that big, outreach into the community. And those are the ones that I want to work with, and I will.
Thank you. Okay, our next question is focused on planning. City planning and development in Los Angeles can be complex and time-consuming for both project reviews and long-range planning. What is one thing that you think is currently working well, and what might you try to change? Tim?
Well, thank you very much. I mean, I think one thing that started out working well was the expedited unit in planning. And the challenge there was that so many projects were taking so long, folks could pay an additional fee, and that project would get expedited. There's a couple of things unfair about that. You pay an additional fee, and then if everybody pays the fee, then nobody's expedited. The big idea that I have, and that I actually worked with when I was a city attorney in Long Beach, is that I would like to see us revisit and actually complete a community development department where we combine and have one general manager over land use planning, over building and safety, and over all of those elements that go into property development.
Thank you.
I think what we find in the city of Los Angeles is too many silos.
Thank you. Danielle?
Thank you. In looking at the city's departments and seeing all the bottlenecks and the processes and the red tape that you have to go through just to get any applications through the process, and the amount of time that it takes is horrendous. And by then the things change in the process. Also, with the community plans, we see the different community plans that are very spotty throughout Los Angeles, and it takes so long. I know, for instance, right now, the Harbor City Wilmington Community Plan has been undergoing a review, a public process. The process is taking so long, and with the rezoning. So beefing up the city staff and these projects is what is absolutely needed, and making sure that the bottlenecks are cut out.
I know 45 seconds is tight. So now we'll switch. Daniel, you'll be first, followed by Tim. So the next question is focused on historic cultural monuments. The current council member for CD 15 has initiated a series of historic cultural monuments to ensure historic places in the district are recognized and protected. Will you continue this practice, and will it be a priority? Danielle?
Short answer, yes. And then some. We need more, not just the ones that are proposed.
Thank you. Brevity is just fine. Tim?
I will also be short and say yes. I mean, I think that the use of this nomination process is great for the community. And I do think it needs to be a process because I think protecting places like the Granada or Walkers, it is really, really great to have the community deeply engaged. But I will be along with the community every step of the way.
Great, thank you both. Okay, the last question before we get to, well, almost the last question. Focus on legacy businesses. In July, the City Council approved the Legacy Business Program, which will offer technical and financial assistance to a number of businesses who have served their community for over 20 years. As council member, how would you support this program? Are there other ways you will advocate to protect legacy businesses in Council District 15? Danielle?
Oh, absolutely. I talk about this all the time in creating the generational wealth. And, when our waterfront disappeared, a lot of our mom and pop shops also disappeared along with it. And going through San Pedro and looking at these old historical, businesses that were there that are no longer there, we need to bring that back. It needs to be protected, and ensuring that these business owners are able to stay there. Once you have a great establishment that you go to, want to make sure that we have that return visit and tourism. And San Pedro and, Wilmington and Watts, they're all historical communities. And making sure that we have that intact within our communities is absolutely vital.
Thank you. Tim?
Yes, be very supportive of these legacy businesses. The businesses, these local family-owned businesses that are multi-generational, do create a sense of place, and they create an identity for the community. We have, several. I am fond of going to the corner store in San Pedro that just celebrated a big anniversary. I think that restaurants like the Watts Coffee House and Los Tres Cochinitos and others are those types of places that folks identify closely with the community. And so working with those business owners and working with the city and making sure that they have all of the assets that they need to remain an important part of our culture is very important. So I will be supportive. Thank you.
Okay, we're getting to our last question. We're going to do another little coin toss to determine who goes first. It's a very, very hard question. Who wants to call it?
Danielle, you want me to go since you called it last time?
That's fine.
Okay, I'll say heads. Thank you.
It's tails. So it works for Danielle's favor this time. So you'll go first,
okay,
and followed by Tim. So the question is, what is your favorite historic place in Los Angeles?
Oh my gosh. There's so many. I'll say Clifford's in downtown LA. There's so many. Bunker Hill as well. Angel's Flight. There's so many landmarks.
Great, thanks. Tim?
Thank you very much. I agree. There's so many landmarks. I do love those landmarks in downtown LA. And in our CD15, we have one of the great iconic landmarks, which is the Watts Towers. Very few, if any, could match its iconic nature. But for me, I'd have to say that my favorite historic landmark is the Warner Grand Theater in San Pedro. Because but for that place, I wouldn't exist. My mom and dad both worked there when they were kids. My mom was a candy girl, which in the bad old days when they called it that, and my dad was an usher, and they met and fell in love there and got married and raised their 6 kids here. So the Warner Grand Theater is my lifetime favorite.
Great, thank you both. We would like to do closing remarks, so we're going to give you a little bit more time, 2 minutes. And we'll start with Danielle this time, followed by Tim. And so go ahead, Danielle.
Thank you. The main reason why I ran for this position is because of the love that I have for Los Angeles and the history of Los Angeles and my own memories, all the way through from Venice Beach to Port Sacal, walking in downtown LA, all the beautiful infrastructure. the landmarks in Hollywood, and wanting to see our city thrive and wanting to see robust local economic corridors, our businesses thriving, generational wealth, people not moving out of the city. And, you know, that's what I want to see. I want to see our city back to what it used to be from what I remember. And we lost that. So many people feel so disconnected and don't recognize our community. They don't recognize the city. They don't recognize San Pedro. And we have those long discussions about all the businesses that used to be there and all the activities and, you know, the beautiful parks and just talking to your neighbor. And people don't feel connected anymore. They feel that they have no voice. And I'm out here empowering, inspiring. And so we can become united again, and we can have a thriving community all throughout the council district. And I want to thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for all the work that you're doing, and to all of its members and volunteers that are a part of the process. Now it's time that we actually have our city back and bring back tourism to not only San Pedro, Watts, and Wilmington and the Gateway. There's so many communities within the city and with our district, and I look forward to working with everyone once I win. Thank you.
Thank you. Tim?
Thank you very much, Adrian, Linda, your team. I really appreciate this opportunity. Danielle, thanks for the opportunity to meet once again in this forum. I agree. This is a great discussion, and the work of the Conservancy is very, very important. I'm running for city council because we have these great existential issues that we need to face: homelessness and the cost of housing, economic recovery coming out of COVID, making sure it's equitable for everyone, the health and safety of every one of our neighborhoods, our environmental sustainability, making sure that we're fighting climate change. And at the same time, doing all of the basic services that have been neglected, particularly neglected in communities that have been left behind. We can do all those things. We can do all those great, face all those great existential challenges while we are also preserving our past and honoring our past. I mean, as you have identified in your report, we can achieve affordable housing by making sure we're hanging on to old stock. We can be sustainable by making sure that we are preserving resources and doing adaptive reuse of projects rather than new construction. So what I'm really excited about is that all of those things that we need to do can well align with the Conservancy, and I'm looking forward to working with you and with your constituency and with all of CD15 to achieve our goals. So thanks very much. This has been a great time, and I appreciate you and your audience.
Great, thank you. Danielle, Tim, thank you so much. The Conservancy really appreciates you taking part in this forum. We learned a lot in the last 45 minutes, and thank you to all those that tuned in today and were part of this. We will be sharing this broadly to all those who registered, all those that are tuned in, but also through our YouTube channel and also through various social media channels. So it'll have broad distribution between now and the election. So we're off to our next Preservation Perspectives program in 2 weeks on Thursday, September 29th at noon, and we'll be featuring the City and Council member and candidate for Council District 13. So if anybody that's here today, please feel free to join us again. Let your friends know that live in Council District 13 to be there so they can join and tune in as well. Again, thank you again to Tim and Danielle and to everyone that's taking part in this, and have a great rest of your day. So thank you.